Hello folks, welcome back to part 3 of my Bickford Explains Everything series, and I think we could all use some definitive clarification about my work. I'm looking forward to this. I'm Jason James Bickford. This is the Valentinian Restoration. After spending a number of years tunneling through many rabbit holes, I've emerged having revealed a number of profound esoteric truths shown to me that were formerly secret yet hidden in plain sight, and also having made dozens of accurate predictions based on my deciphering of our pattern-laced world. However, much of my older work is now no longer available, and what is available is not easily searchable by usual means online, due to being buried in search engine results under and amidst puerile nonsense and anti-marketing propaganda aimed at creating for folks new to my name and work a bad first impression by design. So hopefully we can ameliorate this situation while also shedding new light on patterns and phenomena at the heart of my research and now disappeared media. So here's what to expect from this particular presentation. I'm going to scan through Google search results for my name and work to show you some examples of what I think could be anti-marketing, a type of propaganda designed for warding off sensible and curious seekers of information and explanation. This process will bring up many points of confusion and contention I feel are worth explaining. Finally, this will prompt a concise clarification on my part, allowing me in this one video to unpack some concepts at the heart of my work while providing you with some answers that were either censored, previously unavailable, or not explained to my best ability. I'll conclude with a look at where I'm at now in my ongoing work, to which I am seriously dedicated to continuing with new and refined methods. I'm hoping you, my audience, will come away from this with a deeper understanding of the esoteric concepts that, by their very nature, are not easily grasped, even by intelligent seekers. Also, for those of you that have seen some of my older work, this video is relatively brand new. It's about 20% updated rehashing, 80% new or expanded explanations and breakdowns. So let's begin first with this concept of anti-marketing. I think that might be a new term to most of you. I think I might have coined that term, I'm not sure, but the idea isn't too complicated. Basically, marketing designed to entice you not to look any further into a subject, or in this particular instance, my work in general, or my name. So if people search my name on Google, you're going to get at the top of the results a lot of misleading stuff, like this YouTube page here. This playlist on YouTube uses my full name, 26 videos, last updated a few months ago. None of this is my work or directly related to me here. Adult Swim, Sam Harris, a TED Talk, ABC News talking about COVID. I didn't put that playlist together, as you can clearly see. There's other threads on Reddit. Those threads are closed and cannot be commented on now. So the conversation's already happened and they're frozen there for all to read and misunderstand. So I don't actually agree with what's being suggested here by people that are offering a synopsis of my work. And this is what I think it serves as anti-marketing. Now, I can only speculate about the motivation behind it, but let's actually take a look at some of these comments and I'll show you. And I want to be clear here. I'll comment here on a recurrent theme when my ideas are being either misunderstood or misrepresented. On the exact nature or reasons why my work is regularly censored and misrepresented, I can only speculate. But what I'm certain of, however, is these reframings of my concepts usually illegitimately align me with a strain of tepid conspiracy theory dealing with loose patterns in pop culture buttressed by lurid and paranoid storytelling in the form of gematria breakdowns of news and sporting events. Though it might seem otherwise, my work has nothing to do with that type of speculative media. Let's read further here. This guy says, I actually watched about 70% of this, and I'll be honest, this guy's really good at seeing patterns, but the way he strings those patterns together doesn't make sense to me. That might be both our fault. I do agree that history has reoccurring cycles that can be predicted, and everything generated in this reality seems to correlate with certain key numbers and words. Okay, so I predict events that appear to be chaos, not reoccurring cycles. I'm not focusing on key numbers and words either. When I analyze patterns in media and entertainment, I'm not suggesting history is repeating. It isn't repeating so much as retrofitted to our current paradigms. Patterns in media are repeating, and those embedded patterns point to seemingly unprecedented chaos events that I predict. Super Bowl 51's tie score and overtime embedded in The Dark Knight Rises is one example of a seemingly chaotic and unprecedented event that I proved was predictable by predicting it. The implications here are literally staggering. And these types of misrepresentations literally invert the very nature of my work, kind of making it sound like New Age numerology. I'll read from another blogger. At least, unlike closet atheists Zach Hubbard and Chris Lord, Jason Bickford refreshingly gives us as the source of these coded messages God, or his Gnostic, Sophia. His unified code are emanations from Sophia, and many of these synchronistic predictive Illuminati events are thus carried out by her non-human archons who wear many masks and can appear human. There's a whole lot that I disagree with here. That comes from a truther blogger by the name of Truth Scrambler, by the way, and it's a gross misrepresentation of my personal Christian beliefs. The Gnostics were early Christians. Valentinians in particular were not very different from other early Christians and originated from Hellenized Jews like Paul. St. Paul unabashedly writes as a post-Gnosis seer. His Gnostic visionary experience is recounted by himself and Luke. And Jesus is repeatedly described as, quote, becoming wisdom. That's Sophia. And the rulers or archons operate in opposition to Christ, aka wisdom, aka Sophia. In this sense, Christ dies and becomes kind of like a deliverer of the Holy Spirit, i.e. Sophia. When we look at this statement from Truth Scrambler, not only is it poorly punctuated and has some bad grammar, but it also posits some things I don't suggest at all and are actually completely opposite to what I say. When referring to a spiritual intimation, Sophia, wisdom, means gnosis, a type of knowledge. In 1 Corinthians 1:30, we read, "It is because of him that you are in Christ Jesus, who has become for us wisdom, Sophia, from God, a righteousness, holiness, and redemption." That's repeated throughout the scriptures. Jesus becoming wisdom, Sophia. The Gnostic renaissance of singularity and convergence in spirit in Ephesians 1:7-10 reads, "In him we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of our trespasses, according to the riches of his grace, which he lavished upon us in all wisdom," Sophia, "and insight," King James reads prudence, "making known to us the mystery of his will, according to his purpose, which he set forth in Christ as a plan for the fullness of time, to unite all things in him, things in heaven and things on earth." So there is Christ set forth to bring Sophia and becoming Sophia. That's what's in the letters of St. Paul in the New Testament. Let me get back to that point on recurring loops. I don't believe history repeats itself. I believe in coincidence and chaos. Historians have largely written history, not recorded it. The patterns and loops of human behavior have at least as much to do with the nature of the perception and memory of the historians, the individuals doing the documentation, as they have with any actual nature of reality itself, which is prone to chaotic shifts and unprecedented turns, and one of which I feel we are collectively experiencing now. In other words, we're largely in uncharted waters. I also feel it's worth pointing out conspiracy theorists often want to have it both ways. The irony isn't lost on me that the main source, the very substrate from which conspiracy theorists draw their homespun speculations, is the very thing they're notorious for encouraging others to distrust: the official narratives of media and government. I'll give you 2 examples quickly, and then we can return to the main points of this presentation. So the massively popular phenomenon of ufology was instigated by a science fiction radio hoax and maintained by reports from the news media and the U.S. government. The infamous Roswell, New Mexico incident was made famous thanks to mainstream media news collaborating with the U.S. military. So consider the sources of information truthers tell us not to trust, like Hollywood, the government, and the news media, etc., are the very ones responsible for seeding, spreading, and maintaining UFO paradigms. The mainstream media brought UFOs to our attention as the U.S. military stood by, legitimizing those reports with their own take on things. Ufology was then brought to life on the silver screen by Hollywood. Simply put, when it comes to ufology and other paradigms truthers love, they're created by the people they say are total liars. I've just got one question for you. How many hats can you make with all of that tinfoil? Yeah, that picture, that infamous photo from Roswell, it's a joke on you, but they won't see it because they don't want to. Now, let's go over to JFK. My second most popular YouTube video, Not Even Zapruder, reached about 500,000 views before being taken down, along with the Polarization Nation page shortly thereafter. In it, I suggested nobody shot Kennedy, not even Zapruder. I instead suggested a JFK mannequin loaded with explosive squibs like those used in Hollywood was seen in the Zapruder footage, not a real human getting shot. To date, thousands of books have been published positing conspiracy theories as to who really shot JFK and why. These theories are welcome on the internet and even made it all the way to Hollywood in a film starring Kevin Costner, directed by Oliver Stone. Conspiracy theorists and so-called truthers largely believe whatever they want to believe, and in that sense, they're not much different from everybody else. If the government tells us a UFO crash landed, and to them it sounds crazy, they'll believe it's crazy. If it fascinates them and piques their conscious or unconscious mind in some way, they will likely believe people on the other side of the fence. A current example I'm seeing now that the government is admitting to tracking and documenting UFOs, the same people that accuse the government of consistently lying for decades are now immediately ready to believe the government is suddenly telling them the truth, along with the mainstream media. Again, these people believe whatever they want to believe whenever they want to believe it, and are immune to rational deconstruction of patterns, never mind common sense, for achieving a more holistic Gestalt view. Let's go down the thread here again. And remember, this is archived, so no new conversations can take place. The anti-marketing is posted and then frozen. So anti-marketing is kind of misleading search results by design, and who's the designer? I can only speculate on that, but I can definitely tell you it's not working in my favor, and it misrepresents my work. Are there any predictions of his that were successful? Maybe I'm missing something. Oh boy, I guess that's supposed to get me upset. A fabled event has passed how many times now? So 3 years ago, I said there'd be a worldwide event, and we're living in it right now. Anyway, this other guy talks about Cheetos or Orange Man getting reelected. Again, I never made that prediction. I suggested Biden was going to win, and he did. So, and I'm not pulling that out as supposed to be impressive here. So when I go back over to Google, I get this local prayers thread for Gnostic reclamation. So if you Google search Gnostic reclamation, you get that thread. It looks like some kind of reposting of my videos that doesn't actually function right. You can't get to my Tumblr there, but I am still on Tumblr, and I've made some recent posts there. You can see some of my artwork right here, and I'm happy with my recent artwork. I think it's going well, but other people will have a hard time finding that. So when you post the link from Google, it says no posts found, but as I just showed you, I'm still active on there. You can see here, what does this say? Can you decipher hidden codes? Can you decipher codes hidden in the media? So there's something about the deep state, happy decoding. Of course, the video's been taken down. I don't point towards a deep state. I've kind of made fun of that. There's another link that looks like a Tumblr link, and then when you click on it to look at my artwork, there's 2 examples of my abstract artwork taken out of context, and then there's a whole bunch of pop-up ads, and you can't get out of it. You're going to have to reset your browser. So that's a pop-up ad trap posing as a place where you can see my artwork. Here's a paranormal thread on something not unlike Reddit, and they say this guy's casually cracking ancient esoteric codes and predicting the future, posted by Anonymous. This is another thread that's been archived, so you can read the conversation, but you can't participate in it. That in and of itself is curious, but you'll see a lot of slander here. It looks like the maturity level for the average commenter is not very high here. What does this one say? Oh, it's for schizos and by schizos. And I'll address that in the future here. There's a lot of online psychology experts. So let's go back over to Google, take a look at some of the other threads here. These are excellent examples of anti-marketing, and I'd like to point out there's a lot of puerile, childish bullshit mixed in there. So that gives people a bad first impression. None of that stuff comes from me, but it's being associated with me. Here we have a thread. I don't know if this is 4chan or Reddit, but this is in regards to unified code theory. So someone's done a pretty good job of linking to a number of my videos. None of those are up except for the Carbon 666 breakdown, which I think is a pretty good video. And this commenter says here, he sounds like a paranoid schizophrenic. Edit, after watching 3 of his videos, I'm revising that to he is a paranoid schizophrenic. I'll get into what paranoid schizophrenia actually is later in this video. He also says the attack in Syria, code for a Ritz cracker ban. That's absolutely crazy. I know it sounds crazy, but I proved it happened. That's the difference between me and the crazies. This stuff actually happens. And then he says the Twin Towers never existed, question mark. I never said that. This bullshit running pictures through 15 different manipulations in Photoshop until you see some abstract semblance of a figure, come the fuck on. These are the rantings of a schizophrenic. So that's a complete misrepresentation of what the overlays is. This other person says, my intuition tells me Nash still secretly believes his delusions. That was posted 2 years ago. Nash had been dead for 4 years. So that shows you the level of information they're working with. Again, if this is on purpose, it's clever anti-marketing, but it doesn't have to be on purpose. These people could just be dumbasses and childish. Here I am on another blog post being put into a Sandy Hook hoax meme sandwich, which has nothing to do with my videos. So I've speculated as to why crisis actors exist, but those pictures there in the memes, those don't come from me. And then you have some of my work here linked to, and then some other stuff from Sandy hoaxers and Alex Jones and InfoWars. So what appears at a glance to be a recap or synopsis of some of my work turns into, oh, now you're at Illuminati Watcher and Infowars.com. Now, I will agree, Infowars is a good name. This does appear to be anti-marketing or an information war. Also, there's some Math Institute video. There's a guy with the name Bickford in it. I don't know what that has to do with me. And then we get into some speculations about my work that themselves sound like kind of quasi-schizoid ramblings. And you don't have to be a pattern expert or sensitive with pattern recognition to notice these guys really don't like the overlays method. It's constantly being misrepresented as just crazy schizoid nonsense. This seems to be possibly motivated by the spirit of jealousy, and I believe that's a real spirit. Maybe I'll unpack that in a separate video. This is designed to mislead curious individuals looking into a mind-blowing emergent reality, which is now being speculated about by prominent public intellectuals. I don't want to come across as angry or ranty here either. Some of this is humorous, and it's an excellent opportunity for me to generate some clarification. This example is clearly anti-marketing. It's very misleading. A screen grab of my 1826 Goya painting breakdown, which misrepresents what I call the overlays method. This kind of thing can be used to dissuade any further investigation of the co-creative faculty. This concept is now on the radar of Jordan Peterson. Here's a clip of Peterson speaking with Dr. Ian McGilchrist in a recent upload to his podcast.
This co-creation idea, because that's not a trivial idea. That's an overwhelmingly massive idea.
That is an instance where I wholeheartedly agree with Peterson. Sometimes he's spot on. We don't always agree, but I definitely concur there. Z maintains that Jason Bickford is also part of the mask-wearing, role-switching archontic phenomenon, and I'm actually Topher Grace. Oh boy. Hey Bick, are you starting to see red yet? Are you seeing red?
Dumbass! You dumbass! You're a dumbass. Dumbass. Leisure suits are for dumbasses. Believe me. Jedi dumbass.
So we're clear. I know most of my audience knows this is complete bullshit and these guys are kind of idiots. I'm going to show you a clip of a breakdown I did of Albrecht Dürer's crucifix image to show you what the so-called overlays method is here. Oh, I also think it's worth noting that that blog went from talking about me to directly talking to me in a weird kind of shift there. Speaking of flipping, we're going to take a look at one of the most famous and iconic images of Christ in all of Christian art. And the first international artist in the world was Albrecht Dürer of Germany, the most loved German artist to this day. He was a friend of Martin Luther and even drafted and painted his likeness a number of times. Due to the emergence of the printing press, Albrecht Dürer was able to create very affordable, cheap art prints that could be hung in the home of working class and peasant Christians. So artwork was no longer this elitist luxury item. When I'm gonna process this image in a kind of like pictographic representation of Jungian psychology that is kind of being woo-wooified, watered down, and disseminated to the masses by the living water sprinkle fountainhead of truth that is Jordan Peterson, diminishing truth and then spreading it around to all the shitty mustard seeds on rocky soil. My fellow Christians will understand that symbolic language from Matthew. Those are parables from Christ. That's parabolic. It goes over your head. When we look at this overlay image, I've reproduced this etching of Christ, reduced the opacity. There's Smokey the Bear. There's a Viking hat Joker laughing, sinister eyes moving to and fro. But then if we look at the sinister eyes moving to and fro above that smile and see them as nostrils, we can look above into what would be the hat or the hair and see reptile eyes. So we've got some reptiles, some arachnids, some insects, Vikings. The crown of thorns doubles as this kind of elk head. There's a bear. There's Smokey the Bear. Only you can prevent the fire of Cali fornication. And that has to do with knowledge and choosing what you worship. We all worship. There's no such thing as atheism. Even the atheists are worshiping. They just may not be consciously aware of it. But they are projecting their own co-creative faculties out into the world, and if they don't have conscious control of them, one of these little reptile fuckfaces is gonna take it for you. Take a look at that 1505 date. Look at the mirror. 2021. Now look at the sign above Christ. Miriam, Miri, MRI, 9-inch nails, the knights who say knee. It's all in your head. The fake second coming event that's going to create a new icon with which to found a new religion. This could be a scientific religion based on some sort of manufactured event in the sky. Hollywood's been priming society for an asteroid or an interstellar object or an interstellar visitor. We've been psychologically primed to co-create a number of different events in the sky. The media could, and the military and the UN and the intelligence agencies, you know, that one big happy family that's co-creating the illusion on this farm, well, they could all misrepresent an event that's actually mapping onto Hollywood more than it is any of this imagery. And that's what the whole Ben Affleck thing was about with the Argo. I think this is a truth that's inverted. Look at Christ's hand with the nail here. When we layer this mirror, he looks like he's letting go of the pearl, releasing the pearl. 2020 is hindsight. What are we going to see in 2021? The fake rapture, the fake second coming, the fake alien message or visitation? Are they going to create a new religion? So that was about 3 years ago. And they did mainstream UFOs, and they created the religion. It's called wokeism.
So why use the term wokeism? It's a negative term, and it's mostly used by people on the right. And again, one viewer pointed this out. I'm quoting here Frank McManus, who says, I just Googled wokeism. All the top results were from right-wing American sources. And yet, even though my critique of wokeism is not from the right, I do like the term for one particular reason. Because wokeism is the only of these terms, unlike identity politics or unlike political correctness, unlike virtue signaling, it has very strong religious connotations, right? It connotes awakening. So, and this shows what I think is really at the heart of wokeism, that it's basically a sort of civil religious movement. It's a kind of a secular awakening, somehow in the tradition of earlier great awakenings in American culture. And thereby actually the term wokeism, against the intentions of the people on the right who use it, implies a critique of religion. And again, that's why I do like the term. Now, My central argument is that today's wokeism is the civil religion of the West, and it combines two elements: traditional US-American civil religion and German guilt pride. I'm going to discuss American civil religion first and then German guilt pride second. There's an excellent essay on what American civil religion is. It's written by Robert Bellah in 1967. It's called Civil Religion in America. Bellah takes the term civil religion from Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and like Rousseau, conceives of it as a shared spiritual, political, moral vision and ideology that has kind of a national foundational impact. He rightly says that American civil religion is grounded in Christianity, but then also in the largely secular ideas that we find in such crucial foundational texts as the Declaration of Independence of the United States. Bellah, at the beginning of the article, quotes someone else, S.M. Lipset, to make an important point. So I quote this quote here. He says, "At least since the early 19th century, civil religion has been predominantly activistic, moralistic, and social, rather than contemplative, theological, or innerly spiritual." So civil religion basically represents a shift from strictly theological, let's say, transcendent values to activist, moralistic, and social movement. Now, what does American civil religion consist in? Well, it has strong elements of individualism, a focus on liberty and private property as well, a sense of equality, pursuit of happiness, individual happiness and also collective happiness, progress, prosperity, a sort of pragmatic optimism. Obama's famous slogan, "Yes, we can," also embodies it. And it combines it with a sense of national destiny, some sort of missionary zeal that is supposed to guide the whole world, with the idea of the United States as some form of beacon of liberty, whose role it is to liberate everyone, basically. Bellah pointed out that this American civil religion comes in different forms, and he saw one as positive and one as negative. So it can, and it did, equally inform something like the civil rights movements of the 1960s and 70s, as well as it did inform the Vietnam War, which also supposed, to liberate the Vietnamese people. So there are clearly different denominations of American civil religion. One that is more republic, one that is more democratic, one that's more progressive, one that's more conservative, one that's more left, one that's more right. And Bellah was strongly sympathizing with the more progressive, more leftist denomination, and was actually strongly arguing against the Vietnam War. And he tried to use civil religion to argue against the Vietnam War. And equally today, we can say generally the American civil religion as a whole equally informs the Black Lives Matter movement and the war on terror. However, there are two different denominations within this civil religion, and the one is more strongly behind Black Lives Matter, and the other one, the more conservative one, is more behind the war on terror. I think it's pretty obvious that this activist, individualistic, post-leftist American civil religion, as represented by the civil rights movement and by feminism, is what gave rise to identity politics in the USA in the 1970s, which in turn then later on gave rise to wokeism. So American civil religion, and particularly its progressive post-leftist denomination, are one decisive element that later on constituted wokeism.
So I think the best response to this kind of puerile anti-marketing and shit talking is to just prove these people wrong. So let's take a look at that very Goya 1826 painting, The Milkmaid of Bordeaux. We flip that transparency of the mirror image. We see a cobra shape. Let's slide that like a sliding glass door. And there's Swamp Thing, created in 1970s for DC Comics. Swamp Thing is embedded in Goya's 1826 oil painting. And that looks to be like a compass and square right in the center of his nose. The nose. That's Masonic iconography. Now, normally you would think a conspiracy theorist would have a complete field day. Now, I'm sure this is a completely unrelated coincidence. We've got Swamp Thing and Drain the Swamp paradigms, and then we've got the attempted boycott of Goya because the CEO said a nice thing about Donald Trump. He didn't just say a nice thing, he called him a great builder.
A big backlash today, a campaign to boycott Goya Foods after their CEO praised the president.
We're all truly blessed at the same time to have a leader like President Trump who is a builder. And that's what my grandfather did. He came to this country to build, to grow, to prosper. And so we have an incredible builder, and we pray. We pray for our leadership, our president, and we pray for our country.
Talk about anti-marketing. He just made praying sound bad to every liberal in America. So we've got some Megadeth-looking demonic face up there with horns. You flip it upside down, and there's a face underneath the wings of a bird reaching up and kind of kissing the shape of a white bird coming down. So their beaks are touching, and the girls are kissing. So you've got some girls touching lips, birds touching beaks, and that kind of looks like some Megadeth album art. But it doesn't stop there. Some of this imagery, if it was just one image, you could say, oh, it's a coincidence, but I'm going to keep going here. We've got the Master Builder, the Goya, the Swamp Thing, Drain the Swamp, the kissing birds, the kissing cousins here. So we have the kiss of death, the kiss of Megadeth, maybe? And then there's the phenomenon of the connecting the dots. So there's more imagery in here, and it's embedded, and you can see how you unlock it. Right there, you connect the dots, and that's a Birdman right there. Yeah, I'm sure all this stuff's a coincidence, right? There's nothing really there. Now, while I was doing this, I thought of the phrase flipping the bird. And then I thought, we're flipping images. I see the bird, we're flipping the bird. Well, let's go further and unlock some of that Masonic iconography and coded numbers. Now, this isn't New Age numerology. This is a way of embedding information and hiding it in plain sight. And sometimes it's a little too much for the conspiracy theorists to handle. It requires a little sensitivity and a number of talents. And most of those blogging conspiracy theorists can't put together a well-constructed sentence or paragraph. So I'm not surprised that they wouldn't see this stuff hidden in plain sight. I also think some of them are paid not to see it. It's actually, they're professional red herrings sounding like idiots by design. Many people who have no interest in conspiracy theory know about the ordered degrees of Scottish Rite Freemasonry and the Master Builders.
And so we have an incredible builder.
So this is the Bird's Lair. This is Larry Bird, the 33-degree Master Mason. Now there's some interesting symbolism I'm going to break down with the number 33, but I just wanted to go through the pagan wood nymphs and Naga spirits we also see here. I showed you a little bit of that cobra at the beginning, but here we have a creepy little guy. We flip him upside down and you get, that looks like a little pan creature, a little pagan wood nymph with his white horns and a little furry goatee there. He looks kind of cute, maybe from like a Muppet movie. And then if we rotate our transparency 45 degrees more and then flip it again and we get, well, that guy looks like an unhappy Naga spirit. He's got the split tongue of the serpent, some angry eyebrows. He doesn't look too happy. So there's all types of creatures in here. You can even see Darth Maul from Star Wars, the shitty trilogy there. I think it's episode 2. He shows up. He gets cut in half. Imagine that, cut in half. So here we have a Rio de Janeiro Christ standing on top of the cobra. And then we slide that over, and there's your Master Mason compass. and square iconography. And that's Swamp Thing. It looks like his arms are cut off. Looks like he's been severed at the humerus bone. You know, the bone that connects your shoulder to your elbow? That's the humerus bone. They're taking the piss when they drain the swamp. You get it? You got to look at it from the right angle. It's a little bit of a joke. Maybe this whole world just needs to lighten up and get a little shot in the arm. So that's that's the water pouring out of the arm there.
Now stand aside, worthy adversary. 'Tis but a scratch. A scratch? Your arm's off. No, it isn't.
No, it isn't. This is just the so-called overlays. This can't be real. That's not the Predator and the great white whale reaching up to chomp on Princess Leia's head there, leaking out the humerus bone. You don't get the humerus. You don't get the joke. This isn't spooky and scary end-of-the-world stuff like all the Kekistanian trolls on 4chan would have you believe. Oh, and we'll get into the chemistry of 4chan, Channel 4, and CH4 methane. But yeah, that's the gas in the swamp and in your farts, CH4. So they're draining the swamp, farting in church. That's the great white whale. Moby Dick, flipping the bird. We got the Nagas. We got some angels. We got Christ on top of the cobra. There's your Naga serpent spirit. There's some symbolism in the Naga spirits of the Eastern philosophy or in Eastern religions that maps onto Christ. Christ would be kind of like the gentle Naga. Anyway, you know, when we sync up this overlay imagery with its transparency, we open the door to the Naga and to the joke. They're taking the piss, draining the swamp. That's Goya. There's a Goya boycott by the liberals because they can't see the humerus. Let's go over to the compass and square and the 33 again, and I want to show you some stuff that's hidden in plain sight. Once again, this is not numerology. This is not gematria or gematria. This is plain symbolism hidden in plain sight. So we've got the compass and square symbolism of the Freemasons and that letter G. That's the 8th letter of the English alphabet, and I think of 8 as an infinity sign. We could do this shit all day, forever. So that's a 90-degree angle with the square. And when I think of 33-degree Freemason, I say it out loud, 33. You don't have to break the ice, you just got to melt it. That's the degree at which the ice melts. So we're melting the ice, draining the swamp, breaking down the wall. Now 33s is 90 degrees, right? 33 degrees. If you've got 30 sets of 3 degrees, that's 90 degrees. Also, take a look at that compass and square. That's a W on top of an M. That's like an M wave. So microwaves aimed at your head, keeping you stupid so you can't see this stuff. Or maybe it's just the spirit of denial. And maybe these other master builder haters have a kind of a paranoid spirit, right? They speculate a lot of evil intent on people, and I think it has a lot to do with their own Machiavellian personality and spirit that comes through. So when there's kind of this mysterious thing, I see a joke. I think of Monty Python. I think of taking the piss, and this whole thing is a joke. The country's getting trolled, and they can't see what's staring them right in the face. And that, again, is literally embedded in this painting. But once you see it, you cannot unsee it. So there's a black woman with a head wrap, kind of making a kissy face at the milkmaid of Bardo. And when you look back at this painting now, you can't unsee it. That's shitty craftsmanship in the drapery she's got on her chest. Unless you realize it's to embed the Swamp Thing. You know, the thing.
Think about it. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing.
Chemical equation for methane is CH4. I think of 4chan and also BBC Channel 4. This is where Jordan Peterson got his start. They charged up his mythopoetic symbol power with Keck.
Pepe the Frog has become a symbol synonymous with the internet and meme culture. Whether it be through conveying emotions, telling jokes, expressing political beliefs, or even taking on more humanoid appearances, Pepe has been seen and used the world over, and not just on the internet either. More conventional forms of media and high-profile public figures have taken stances with or against Pepe, depending on their interpretation of what Pepe represents. But beneath its unassuming, cartoony exterior, there's a much deeper mythological meaning within this frog, a meaning which may have been prophesied by ancient cultures and texts throughout history. Join me as I explore the eerie similarities between Pepe the Frog and a number of historically significant writings and depictions, all of which seem to be pieces of a larger puzzle which is slowly revealing itself to us. Meme was born. This reference became popularized on 4chan and other image boards in the late 2000s and remains relevant to this day, albeit taking on many more forms than the original. Now, kek, at least as we know it today, is a term that comes from the popular PC game World of Warcraft. When players on the Horde faction of the game typed LOL, it would appear as kek, spoken in Orcish, to the Alliance players. Naturally, there was a lot of crossover between World of Warcraft players and forum posters since they were both avid internet users. Kek was later adopted as another popular meme in the mid to late 2000s, but it's only recently resurfaced and regained a lot of popularity. Things really started getting interesting when the convergence of both Pepe and Kek on image boards created what is known as the cult of Kek. While Pepe the Frog and Kek seem to be nothing more than harmless references to modern-day entertainment, the cult of Kek is actually based on a mythological figure from ancient Egypt, the god known as Kek, also called Cuck. Interestingly, the term Cuck in the English language has also seen a huge resurgence in popularity. It's become ubiquitous with both internet and real-life insults. This Egyptian deity, Kek, is represented by a frog or a man with a frog for a head, and interestingly, it bears a lot of similarity in artistic style to the modern Pepe of today. A hugely popular item referenced along with Kek and Pepe is this peculiar relic. Reproductions of it can be purchased through Amazon and other websites, and it's become a bit of a novelty item. It's a statue of a frog with strange hieroglyphics written on the pedestal. These hieroglyphics are said to represent Kek, yet others actually say it represents a goddess named Heket, the frog goddess of childbirth. Followers of Kek interpret these markings as a man staring at a computer monitor with the double helix symbol representing DNA and meme magic. And it really does look like an ancient depiction of exactly that. Initially, this sculpture and the inscriptions on it seem absolutely mind-blowing, and it's often cited as a piece of evidence further validating the Kek prophecies. However, upon further investigation, I was unable to discern whether this statue is actually a genuine historic artifact. The closest legitimate artifact I was able to find was indeed a frog statue representing Kek, which is pretty interesting in itself, but those inscriptions were not carved into it, at least not from what I saw. With a bit of research on Egyptian hieroglyphs, I was able to find most of the symbols shown on the Heket relic, such as the double helix, the man sitting down, and even a part of the alleged monitor, but I was not able to find all of them in one place and in the order shown on that relic. What seems most likely is that this Heket statue is a reproduction based closely but not entirely on the original sculptures of Kek. But again, as far as the symbols go, I think it's a bit of a stretch to say that they are legitimate and they really mean what they say, given that I was not able to find that combination anywhere else or associated with Kek outside of this statue. The Egyptian deity Kek has two parts, male and female. The female aspect was known as Keket, and together they represented both night and day. Kek as a whole was referred to as the raiser up of the light, or the bringer of light, out of primordial darkness. Believers in Kek cite this as a representation of the political upheaval in modern times, and initially the title of the Bringer of Light was attributed to Donald Trump, although it is not necessarily intrinsically tied to him. Another key aspect of this cult of Kek, as it's called, is numerology and probability. Most followers of Kek are frequent users of the website 4chan, and more specifically the political or poll message board. Each post made by users is given an ordered number in relation to other posts, except there are potentially thousands of other posts being made simultaneously, meaning that the ending digits of a particular post are essentially random. Occasionally, users will roll by posting to predict certain events or outcomes, and repeating digits usually signify some sort of truth. The number 7, however, is often revered as being a highly symbolic and powerful one, which makes a lot of sense because the number 7 has been used throughout history and mythology to represent luck, divinity, and truth. As the 2016 election was coming to a head, 4chan was rife with Pepe's and Kek references, as per usual, but many prediction and roll threads also arose, and one particular thread was surprisingly prophetic. Below the post saying "shit dick" and "Jesus lives," you can find a monstrosity of a post which made history. The post in question replied to hundreds of other poster IDs who happened to have 7s in their digits, and it issued 3 simple words: Trump will win. And lo and behold, the poster's ID was a perfect string of 7s. Of course, against all odds, this statement ended up being true. This event is often cited as proof that the prophecy of Kek actually bears some power.
Okay, I think it's definitely worth just interrupting this sampled video for a little clarification here. Again, I'm Jason Bickford. I did not make that video, and I do not co-sign everything that I sample. I've sampled this popular video to illustrate what the denizens of the internet and 4chan think and say about Pepe and Kek as a cultural phenomenon. I don't spend time on 4chan or similar boards, and I never have. It's kind of like unfiltered YouTube comments without the videos. In other words, it's worthless for much more than observing social engineering of impressionable young adults, and the monitoring of whom is not without its uses. So it's worth checking in on what the culture trolls are doing after getting primed and programmed. Now, predicting Trump would win was a 50-50 chance. I mean, he'd either win or lose. That's not an impressive prediction. And I made that prediction myself when I saw the left intentionally splitting their vote with the Hillary-Bernie side battle, while the GOP curiously couldn't find a more attractive candidate. That, to me, was clear telegraphing of the outcome, and I said so on social media 14 months ago before the election. And I even called the month Bernie would drop out over a year before it happened. Now, 4chan users fall for all types of conspiratorial paradigms, so I find it curious that they would believe the number generator for comments is always random. The easily riled up alt-right set love to troll folks, but can't imagine that the powers that be would use and troll them. I see that as a curious and telling failure of imagination. There's all types of numbers in the Bible, by the way, not just 7. So you can take any 1,500-page book off the shelf and find all types of numbers in there, because there's only 9 integers. Oh, and 2 of them are pictographic twins, 6 and 9. So again, those aren't impressive. And I'm just pointing that out to explain why I'm sampling the video. Pepe is clearly used for marketing, and anything trending is hopped on and reappropriated by internet-savvy folks with something to sell. Again, that should be obvious, but I think we're largely dealing with cloistered young adults and maladaptive people. And no, I don't vote. I stopped voting about 9 years ago, and even then I suspected it was a waste of my time. It would require a cataclysmic shift in our cultural paradigms for my esoteric ideas and positions to become popular. If I wanted simply to be popular online, I could have said all my work was inspired by Pepe or Kek, and hence ingratiated myself to the alt-right trolls, who are the ground of support for a myriad of public intellectuals and personalities. Or I could have gone woke, announced myself as transgender, and watched all the numbers skyrocket. Anyway, that being said, I believe the winners of presidential elections are a symptom of the direction social engineering is pushing the nation, and so they're not without consequence. I've simply disabused myself of the illusion we, the people, make those decisions. Democracy means ask the mediocre, and I don't think that's what the powers that be are doing. Donald Trump and Joe Biden may be pigs in suits, or they may be playing roles. Perhaps a little bit of both. What I'm concerned with is the narrative being played out and promoted across the media, which suggests the boogeyman of Trump is denounced and defeated, while liberals clearly failed the national mirror test. Now their insufferable lack of guilt and responsibility outside the mandatory white guilt virtue signaling of the secular wokeism sweeping the left may go into overdrive to aid an even deeper cultural divide, while we magically recover from the manufactured crisis my esoteric deciphering of patterns predicted almost 4 years ago. The ultimate irony and sign of the times is that I began blogging under the name Polarization Nation Media a decade ago to address the media's manufactured cultural divide, pushing us apart, only to see the hyper divide come full circle. I kind of joined in the middle in achieving a near uniform extremism that unites us in a cavalcade of solipsism. So bring on the million individual march of precious unique pronouns, all united in their solipsistic narcissism. Back to the video.
There are many instances where the number 7 is used to make predictions or connect things to the Keck prophecy. Another such example I've seen are the cities Pepe and Keck, located in Italy and Hungary, respectively. According to this image, they are exactly 777 miles apart, although this distance is calculated using on-foot directions. I tried to emulate these results using Google Maps myself, and while close, the distance I got was 768 miles apart, even when using the same on-foot distance filter. Although, if you move the pin just slightly on either side, or better yet, even more slightly on both sides, you could easily get to a distance of 777 miles, which is admittedly a pretty strange coincidence. As I mentioned earlier, ancient texts also play a part in this whole story. The Christian Bible and the Hebrew Torah both have accounts of the 10 plagues of Egypt, and plague number 2 was frogs. Exodus 8:4 reads, "The frogs will come up on you and your people, and all of your officials." Followers of Keck have interpreted this to reflect the modern day. Perhaps this sudden worldwide fascination with a cartoon frog is a modern version of the plague of frogs, and a sign of what's to come. Interestingly, I found that the specific reference in the Bible verse to frog swarming people and officials actually did have a lot of parallels to the similar frustration officials of today have in regards to Pepe the Frog. Here are just a few examples I've come across. During the election cycle, Hillary Clinton declared a war on Pepe because it had been used to depict anti-Semitic imagery. Interestingly enough, she also lost the race not long after this. There was also this now infamous report from Rachel Maddow during the election cycle, which vilified Pepe in a similar fashion to Hillary.
Known as the alt-right. So it's not like an applause moment or like a booing moment or whatever. It's quiet. Everybody's listening to what she says. As soon as she says that phrase, alt-right, some guy yells out from the crowd, "Pepe!" Because Pepe refers to Pepe the Frog, this otherwise innocuous cartoon character, which, as unlikely as it may sound, it is one of the things that the racist right has adopted as a symbol online.
So they could have ignored the guy who yelled Pepe and then just let all these guys stay on 4chan, but they got to bring them out the closet and kind of charge this meme. Now, the meme think virus is something I've been talking about for years, and I think I understand now why all those videos were taken off the internet, because I was spot on about that. So drain the swamp thing. In the UK, you might call it take the piss, right? So Trump's slogan in the UK would be, take the piss, take the piss. That means just to, razz someone up, well, it's to cast a spell on someone, a satire. And we're going to talk about how that's kind of magic, a mimetic magic. So Rachel Maddow is kind of promoting an anti-marketing that goes into disgust media. And that's what MSNBC deals with. They make people disgusted with a different group of people that they don't identify with or understand. And I know from personal experience that these uber liberals out in Western Mass, where Rachel Maddow comes from, they don't know the people on the other side of the political fence. They get all that stuff from TV and the internet. So we're talking about Drain the Swamp thing, and I'm looking at some stuff here from DC Comics, or this is a blog about a DC comic book character, Swamp Thing. He was also in some movies. They did some movies back in the day. So some New England comic creators from the Vermont area, Rick Veitch and Steve Bissett, worked on Swamp Thing after it was revamped by Alan Moore. Alan Moore is known for V for Vendetta, The Watchmen, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, the Jack the Ripper graphic novel From Hell, and other comics work. Warner Brothers has largely adapted his work, and he's not too happy about it. So we're going to hear from Alan Moore, and we're going to hear about artwork as a form of magic. I just wanted to point out this infamous issue 88 of Swamp Thing, which was never published because it featured a story in which Swamp Thing encounters Christ on the cross. So Swamp Thing's doing a little bit of time traveling. DC didn't like this. Curious, they'll make supervillains out of demons and angels and witches and feature all types of quasi-Christian bad guys. But they won't touch Jesus in the mainstream comics, and I think it's because they don't want to charge up the mimetic power of Christ. And I'm going to get into, after we hear from Alan Moore about art and magic, I'm going to get into why this is so. But I thought I just wanted to point out here that Swamp Thing and the Pepe meme are correlated with the Goya painting and the Goya boycott and the presidency of Trump and the tactics of disgust media from Rachel Maddow, who comes from Western Mass, where some of these comic books are published, by the way. But I'm going to break all that down in more detail in part 2 after we hear from Alan Moore. So we're going to have a little chat with Alan Moore, and then join me in part 2.
The Swamp Thing was created in 1972 by Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson. Now there's a new incarnation of the Swamp Thing by artists Stephen Bissette and John Totleben and writer Alan Moore. It's one of DC's fastest-growing fan favorites. We asked Len what he thinks of the new Swamp Thing.
Biggest question people ask me is, how could you let him do that to your characters? You know, how don't you hate what he's doing? And people who don't realize that I picked him to do that. I have no problems with it. It's his book now. He's taken it in different places. I really enjoy what he's doing with the book. And as Karen Berger probably attests, as soon as a new script comes in, I demand a copy as soon as she's done reading it, just so I can see what he's doing. I'm fascinated by it.
One of the reasons the book works so well is the shared vision of the Swamp Thing's artistic team. Editor Karen Berger coordinates their efforts.
Before Alan even came to the book, Steve and John had their own visions of the character, and coincidentally it happened to be Alan's, close to Alan's as well in terms of getting into really revamping the character and really getting to the horror aspect of the book.
We asked Alan Moore to give us his ideas about horror.
We're going to try and actually focus upon the reality of American horror and see if we've got some good material there to turn horror comics out of. That's the plans.
You seem to be focusing on some world horror too, don't you? You're going to deal with nuclear war and...
Well, I tend to think that the horror that existed in the 40s with the Universal films, it's played out. It's a different audience now. I mean, what frightens people these days is not the idea of a werewolf jumping out at them. It's the idea of a nuclear war or any of the sort of the things that we have coursing through our society at the moment, and I think that to really frighten people, you have to somehow ground the horror in their own experience, things that they're frightened of. I mean, in a recent Swamp Thing, I managed to touch upon bug fear, because everybody's frightened of bugs, it doesn't matter how big and tough they are, you get a big enough spider, and so everybody backs away from it. So, I suppose it's a bit cynical and manipulating, but I do like to try and put my finger upon the exact nerve, if possible, of what really scares people. It's sadism, and I'm getting paid for it,
On my 40th birthday, rather than merely bore my friends by having anything as mundane as a midlife crisis, I decided it might be more interesting to actually terrify them by going completely mad and declaring myself to be a magician. This had been something that had been coming for a while. It seemed to be a logical end step in my career as a writer. And the problem is that with magic, being in many respects a science of language, you have to be very careful what you say. Because if you suddenly declare yourself to be a magician without any knowledge of what that entails, then one day you are likely to wake up and to discover that that is exactly what you are. There is some confusion as to what magic actually is. I think that this can be cleared up if you just look at the very earliest descriptions of magic. Magic, in its earliest form, is often referred to as the art. I believe that this is completely literal. I believe that magic is art, and that art, whether that be writing, music, sculpture, or any other form, is literally magic. Art is, like magic, the science of manipulating symbols, words or images, to achieve changes in consciousness. The very language of magic seems to be talking as much about writing or art as it is about supernatural events. A grimoire, for example, the Book of Spells, is simply a fancy way of saying grammar. Indeed, to cast a spell is simply to spell, to manipulate words, to change people's consciousness. And I believe that this is why an artist or writer is the closest thing in the contemporary world that you are likely to see to a shaman. I believe that all culture must have arisen from cult. Originally, all of the facets of our culture, whether they be in the arts or the sciences, were the province of the shaman. The fact that in present times this magical power has degenerated to the level of cheap entertainment and manipulation is, I think, a tragedy. At the moment, the people who are using shamanism and magic to shape our culture are advertisers. Rather than trying to wake people up, their shamanism is used as an opiate to tranquilize people, to make people more manipulable. Their magic box of television, and by their magic words, their jingles, can cause everybody in the country to be thinking the same words and have the same banal thoughts all at exactly the same moment. In all of magic, there is an incredibly large linguistic component. The bardic tradition of magic would place a bard as being much higher and more fearsome than a magician. A magician might curse you. That might make your hens lay funny, or you might have a child born with a club foot. If a bard were to place not a curse upon you, but a satire, then that could destroy you. If it was a clever satire, it might not just destroy you in the eyes of your associates. It would destroy you in the eyes of your family. It would destroy you in your own eyes. And if it was a finely worded and clever satire that might survive and be remembered for decades, even centuries, then years after you were dead, people still might be reading it and laughing at you and your wretchedness and your absurdity. Writers and people who had command of words were respected and feared as people who manipulated magic. In latter times, I think that artists and writers have allowed themselves to be sold down the river. They have accepted the prevailing belief that art and writing are merely forms of entertainment. They're not seen as transformative forces that can change a human being, that can change a society. They are seen as simple entertainment, things with which we can fill 20 minutes, half an hour while we're waiting to die.
I'm entirely crowdsource funded, and if you want to click on the Linktree link in the description, you can find links to all of my online media, so beat the anti-marketing by getting my links directly from one spot on Linktree. From there you can pop up the shop window or go over to gnosticonpress.com and see what I've got on my Teespring store. We've got posters, pillows, mugs, t-shirts, hoodies, and I'm going to be uploading some ebooks, some digital comics. Got a Patterns Emerge or Unified Code shirt. For as little as $5 a month, you can hit me up at patreon.com/Bickford. and you'll see I'm posting some blogs, some downloadable goodies, some exclusive content. So support me, buy something, hit me up on Patreon, and we will pick up here in part 2, which is going to be loading very soon. Thank you. Good night. God bless. Thanks for coming out.